the Border Patrol or the customs people or anything that had to do with our security, including the soldiers. That includes using them as backdrops. Those people that are charged with the life and death of the United States should always be beyond suspicion. I was brought up believing that they always worked for everybody, not that they were surrogates for who happened to be in the governor's pension. I know that Beto will make a difference.
Yes, sir.
And Beto, welcome.
Thank you so much, Deacon Salinas. Thank you all for being here, taking some time out of your Monday to join us and to welcome us back to Rio Grande City. It has been a little while since we've been with you in a meeting like this where we can have a conversation with the community. And I'm really looking forward to it. I'm gonna make sure that as I make my comments, I try to keep them as brief as I can so that we can turn the microphone back over to you. I came here to listen and to learn and to find out what's on your mind and how we can work together to better serve each other, our neighbors, the people of Texas. Not Democrats, not Republicans, not independents, but all of the people of Texas. That is why we are here today. I want to thank Dr. Vera Rios for organizing this, for being such a great leader in the community. Through her, I want to wish her dad a full and speedy recovery for whatever he has right now. I reached out to him a little bit earlier today with the same message. He's also a great leader, along with all these other public servants who are elected into offices of public trust. We're grateful to each of you. And I want to say a special word for the members of law enforcement who are here today. They take on willingly one of the toughest jobs we can ever ask of one another. Not only are they there to prevent and to solve crime, including violent crime, we all too often ask them to do everything that our society seems incapable of addressing, whether it is drug addiction or homelessness or domestic violence in our homes. Literally, it is these members of law enforcement that are the first to respond, very often putting their lives on the line in the process. And they're here with us today, and I just want to give them a round of applause as well for what they do. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you to South Texas College, and thank you to you all. Listen, I thought I'd start with the biggest question I could ask of myself, I could ask of you. And that is, what kind of Texas do we want to live in going forward? We could talk about policy and laws and statistics and facts and numbers and data, and I'm sure we're going to get to that. But take just a moment to think about the kind of Texas that you want to be in. And for the youngest among us, think about the kind of Texas that you want to grow up in and what you want this place to be like when you're as old as I am. I'm 49 years old. I'm almost going to be 50 this year. I think that's what this election is all about. And those of us who have dedicated ourselves to public service, that's why we serve on the school board or on the city council or as a county commissioner or as a Democratic Party chair. We're just trying to make this a better place, not just for those who think like we do or belong to the same party that we belong to, but for all of us. And I think that events of the last couple of weeks have really brought this into sharp focus for me as a lifelong Texan, as a Texan who with my wife Amy is raising 3 kids in our border community of El Paso. Ulysses, who just finished his freshman year at El Paso High School, his younger sister Molly, who just finished 8th grade and will soon be joining him at El Paso High this coming August. And then their little brother Henry, who just finished 5th grade at Mesita Elementary, the same elementary school that I went to. When I was at their completion ceremonies last week, and at the middle school completion ceremony and the elementary school completion ceremony, the principal said, don't you dare call this a graduation. There's only one graduation in a kid's life, and that's when they're 18 and they're getting their high school diploma. They're just completing elementary school, they're just completing middle school. And I thought, I'm so proud of these kids, so proud of their mom, who is so often the one to help them through their math homework. I was in remedial algebra for every year of high school, so I'm the last guy that's going to be able to help them on that. Just proud of the determination, the effort. Their teachers, the counselors, the librarians, the school nurse, the bus driver who literally drove them to school every single day when they would walk over to the park where the bus driver would pick them up. Everyone who made this year of their lives and this education for them possible. But not far from my mind, and maybe you all felt the same way after Uvalde, I'm also grateful that they just made it through, that they're alive right now. And I was in San Antonio Saturday, and a guy approached me and said, I just went to my daughter's high school graduation, same feelings, right, of pride, but he said, I felt this guilt, and my guilt was that I felt like we got one through. And so when I think about the kind of Texas I want to live in, the kind of Texas that I want for my kids, it's a Texas that first and foremost is safe for them, where the only thing that we are worried about is the kind of grades that they're going to get, the kind of help that we can provide to them to make sure that they graduate on time and are fulfilling their potential, making sure that they're not eating too much junk food, or that they're doing well in their athletic competitions, or in my daughter's case, she participated in National History Day, and with her team at her middle school, made it all the way up to the state competition. Those are the things that I want to be focused on. But it's interesting as I listen to my kids who share with me, hey, at school today, my teacher taught me and my 22 other classmates how to hide in this big double-sized closet and not make a sound so that we're ready when that guy comes in with an AR-15 or an AK-47, a weapon originally designed for war, whose high-impact, high-velocity round, when it hits your body, just pulverizes everything inside. The soft tissue, the blood vessels, the arteries, your organs, they're just turned to pulp. You bleed out before we can save your life and take you to a hospital. That's what it was intended to do. That my kids are focused on that, that their teachers are trying to figure out how they can, after everything they've done, to improve their education, to literally be the difference in life and death for them as they've addressed 2 years of the pandemic, who are their unofficial therapists, and sometimes for those kids who don't have a clean pair of clothes, they're wearing the same jeans, the same dirty t-shirt, probably the same pair of chones every single day when they show up. That teacher recognizing that that kid needs to be able to hold his head high so that he can compete with every other kid in the classroom, often out of her own pocket, she will pay for a new set of clothes that she now has to think about whether or not she's going to take a bullet for those kids in that classroom. That today, ladies and gentlemen, is where we are in the state of Texas. Over the last few days, we've had meetings like this one in San Antonio, in Austin, and in Dallas. Yesterday, I was in Uvalde. I cannot tell you how many educators have approached me and told me, one who was a chemistry teacher said, you know what, I feel like I've got it kind of lucky. I have these big, sturdy lab tables, these chemistry lab tables. I think we can all hide behind those, turn the lights off, lock the door. The shooter may not know that I'm in that room. Another teacher said, I've got a 15-year-old girl at home. That's the same age as my Molly is about to turn a little bit later this month. And she asked me, hey, Mom, when the shooter comes into your classroom, are you going to die for those kids, or are you going to try to stay alive for me? And this teacher was telling me this. I remember her name, Bonnie. This is in San Antonio. She was crying as she told me this. Why does she have to think about that? You know, I want her focused on her kids, literally her child in her home, but those kids in the classroom. I want to be listening to her about how we replace the STAR test, no offense, Starr County, but the STAR test with something that is a better job of helping kids who need the assistance, that is not used as a punitive measure to withdraw funds from schools, but a true diagnostic that gets the help where it needs to be. I want to get her best ideas on how we improve fourth grade reading scores. 7 out of 10 fourth graders in the state of Texas cannot read at grade level. Makes it very hard for them to do well in 5th and 6th and 7th grade, to graduate from high school on time, to pursue post-secondary education right here at South Texas College. I want to be having that conversation with Bonnie, not the conversation about how is she going to die, or will she escape and be able to be with her child. So in this state that just witnessed the tragedy, the massacre in Uvalde, where 19 children were shot and killed in their classroom, 2 teachers defending those kids' lives also lost their lives. One of those teachers' husbands died within 48 hours of a heart attack. We can only imagine the grief and the pain and the suffering that he was just experiencing. Unfortunately, as you know, that is not an outlier in our state. In my hometown of El Paso, Texas in 2019, 23 people were murdered with someone who had a similar type of weapon, who had been warned that immigrants were coming in to invade our country, that Hispanics were going to take over from Anglos in terms of political power in the state of Texas, and somebody needed to repel that invasion. And this guy was listening, and he drove from Allen, Texas, 600 miles to the Walmart in my hometown of El Paso, in tactical gear that you would use on a battlefield, with a weapon originally used for use in war, and opened fire on those who he had been told were invading this country. That was in 2019. That was 3 years ago. The next month in Midland, Odessa, guy buys a similar type of weapon, opens fire on people in that community, kills 7 people, shoots a baby girl in the face. Luckily, she survived that, a miracle if there ever was one, but 7 others did not. The year before any of that happened, at Santa Fe High School in Galveston County, just outside of Houston, kids were shot by a fellow classmate who picked up his parents' unsecured guns, walked it into those classrooms, and just began blowing people away. Sutherland Springs, there are almost too many for us to mention. And as painful as this is to talk about, I raise it because unless we confront it, unless we literally stand up to it, while we still have the opportunity to do something, this is going to continue to happen. You heard our governor, the Wednesday following that shooting, the day after that shooting in Uvalde, say, this is evil, this is totally unpredictable. You got to think, when you have mass shooting after mass shooting, when you have 4 of the worst mass shootings in U.S. history right here in the state of Texas in the last 5 years, this is no longer unpredictable. In fact, right here today in Rio Grande City, I predict this is going to continue to happen unless we are willing to stand up and change course. And I'm not asking anyone to do anything radical or to do anything that we would not feel comfortable with as gun owners, as Texans, as people who are part of a long, proud tradition of responsible gun ownership. In addition to thoughts and prayers, and I'm not one who dismisses thoughts and prayers. In fact, when I called and then sat with some of these families in Uvalde the day after that shooting, one of the things they asked for were our prayers. They said, this is in God's hand right now. My daughter is in heaven. I want you to be praying for her. We all got to be doing that. But these same parents also asked us for action. They said, I don't want anyone else to feel the way that I feel right now, Beto. They told me as I sat at their kitchen table with them within 24 hours of them losing the lights of their lives. So what can we do? There's something called a universal background check that ensures that anyone who buys a firearm in the state of Texas goes through a little bit of vetting, some due diligence. Members of law enforcement here might be able to confirm that when we have an idea of who's purchasing that firearm, when we know whether they have tried to hurt somebody before or hurt themselves, and we have an epidemic of gun suicide in this state, as well as gun murders and other forms of gun violence, then we can intervene before the tragedy takes place. But when there is no background check, and we don't have universal background checks in Texas, we're kind of left to our own devices. It's kind of like, good luck. I hope that this person does not use that gun against you. Do these work? I mentioned that Midland, Odessa shooting. The guy went into a federally licensed firearm dealer in an attempt to buy an AR-15. Didn't pass the background check, because if you go into one of those shops, they have to perform one. But because Texas does not have a universal background check, he was able to go buy from a private seller, literally buy the same weapon out of the trunk of that guy's car, and then go use it against the people in that community of Midland, Odessa. Would it prevent every instance of gun violence? No, it would not. But would it prevent more of these from happening? Yes, it would. And gun owners and non-gun owners, Republicans and Democrats alike, can get behind that idea. Here's another one. A safe storage law. And all this is, and those of you who own firearms, you are probably and hopefully already doing this, and so you get this. If you have a gun in the home, keep it secured. If you have a gun in the home and you have a little kid in the home, you especially should keep it secured. How often have you seen the news story of a 3-year-old who finds their mom or their dad's gun, picks it up, points it at themselves, and pulls a trigger, or shoots their baby brother or sister? Unfortunately, it happens all the time. When I went to Santa Fe, Texas, in Galveston County after that school shooting to meet with parents who had lost their kids, one of those parents, an Army veteran, a gun owner herself, a school bus driver, at that same school district where her daughter was killed, Rhonda Hart, she raised her hand and she said, hey, Beto, if we had a safe storage law, that 17-year-old classmate of my daughter's would not have been able to get his hands on his parents' firearms and bring them into this school and shoot my baby girl and her other classmates. This could have averted that massacre or that disaster. So safe storage laws, gun owners, non-gun owners alike, again, can get behind that. It will prevent some, not all, but some more of these disasters that we see. Two more quick ones for you on this. One is something that is known as an extreme risk protection order. Too many syllables for my liking. Other folks call it a red flag law. In terms that I can understand, this just means that when someone is behaving as though they might hurt themselves, is behaving as though they might hurt you or your kids in their classrooms, we intervene and remove that weapon from them before they can use it against somebody else. That El Paso shooting that I talked about, when that young man ordered the AK-47, which he would later use to kill people in my community, his mom called the police in Allen, Texas, and said, please help me. I don't know even what I'm asking for, but my son, he's not acting right. He just bought this AK-47. I don't know why he needs it or how he's going to use it. But all the police could do under our current laws was say, I'm sorry, good luck, you're on your own. No way that we can help you. And we all know what happened after that. Again, there are people who will agree with me and disagree with me on different aspects of policy that I propose. Almost everyone agrees that we want to intervene before it is too late. And then the last one, and this is one where, look, I want to respect the differences of opinion between us. Because there are some here today who own an AR-15 or who own an AK-47, and you use them responsibly and you keep it locked up, and you would never, in your wildest nightmares, ever allow that firearm out of your possession to be used against another human being. The thing is, from my perspective, having 23 neighbors killed by an AK-47, having just met the parents in Uvalde who lost their children to an AR-15, there's no reason, in my mind, that any civilian should possess a weapon that was originally designed and engineered for use on a battlefield, because it is so devastatingly effective at taking the lives of the human beings in our lives. So I also propose that we stop selling these AR-15s and AK-47s and get them out of our communities. That's the Texas that I want to live in. One where our kids no longer have to worry about what will happen to them when they go to school. One where our educators and counselors and those who make our public schools world-class in this state are able to focus on those children and their education and not on preventing them from being victims of another mass slaughter. But on this subject of children and the generation that's going to follow all of us here today, let me bring up two other points in the kind of Texas that I want to live in. Right now, we are 50th out of 50 states in access to health care and the ability to see a doctor and to have any kind of medical insurance at all so you can afford your prescription or the ability to take your kid to a therapist. Now, what does 50th mean? It means that you're last. It means that in previous visits to Starr County, I have met people who have diabetes, who have glaucoma, who are unable to see a doctor or afford a prescription of insulin, something that was invented 102 years ago and costs nothing to produce, but they're prevented from taking because they don't have insurance, because this state has refused to expand Medicaid. It's a program that would bring $10 billion a year back to Texas. This is money that you paid in your federal income taxes up to DC that is going to be sent back here if we'll just take yes for an answer. Unfortunately, our current governor has said no, and so it's still out there or going to other states, and people are dying of diabetes, of the flu, of curable cancers in our community for lack of political leadership at this moment. And in fact, ladies and gentlemen, more kids, more little people in our lives die of diabetes in this state than in any other. Now, when you live in the wealthiest, most powerful, most medically advanced country that God has ever known, when you're the 9th largest economy on the planet, that's Texas, when you have a $2 trillion gross domestic product, when your biannual budget in the state government is $250 billion a year, there's absolutely no excuse for not saving the lives of these little kids. And so what's the answer? Well, we could expand Medicaid, and the federal government pays 90 cents on the dollar for expansion. Those $10 billion flow into our communities. We hire more providers. I think there is one psychiatrist total in Starr County. I was looking at the statistics earlier. Our mental therapist to population ratio here is not on the level of the rest of this country or the rest of this state. It's on the level with some countries that are the south of where we are here in the state of Texas. Bringing that $10 billion in a year attracts more providers, keeps them in the community, and connects more people with care, including mental health care, where again, we're 50th in the nation in being able to see a therapist, a social worker, a provider, anyone who can provide that life-saving care for us. So in the Texas I want to live in, we're able to see that doctor, afford that prescription, go to that provider, ensure that our kid is well enough to attend class and live to her full potential. Last item that I want to bring up, especially around kids, and that is Child Protective Services. In other words, the agency that is involved when, for whatever reason, a child has to be removed from a home, or they have lost their parents, or they have no next of kin who will take care of them. They become part of the foster care system. 32,000 little children in the state of Texas are part of the foster care system right now. And ladies and gentlemen, it is the worst run foster care program in the state of Texas. Since the year 2020, 100 little children have lost their lives in the custody and care of the state of Texas. At some CPS offices, there are kids sleeping under the tables tonight, in the hallways, on top of the desks, and this is not a new thing. 6 years ago, a federal judge told Greg Abbott, when kids emerge from the foster care system at age 18, Mr. Governor, they are more damaged than when they first went in. You have got to do something about it. In January of this year, 6 years later, she just issued a new opinion from her bench saying, that problem that I first warned you about, Mr. Governor, has gone from bad to worse. Kids are literally dying on your watch. The most vulnerable, literally, among us. And I love when Dr. Beto Rios was giving the introduction and describing this community. It's much like my community in El Paso. Tight-knit, family-based. Many of us grew up, myself included, within the Catholic Church, defining ourselves by how we treat the most vulnerable among us. And how are we doing right now in Texas? No state is doing worse than how we're doing right now here in the state of Texas. But again, not for lack of resources, not for lack of wealth, just for lack of leadership and political will. So in the Texas that I want to live in the Texas where I want to serve you as our next governor, I want to make sure that we address the issues of gun violence, access to health care, protecting those kids who are in CPS, and then focusing on building up the things that should really make us proud. Making sure that our educators are paid a true living wage. They don't have to work a second or a third job. Ensuring that academic excellence is our watchword. We're going to have the best system of public schools in the nation, in the world, if I have anything to do with it. I want to make sure that cost is no object to anybody getting the health care or the resources that they need to fulfill their true promise. And when it comes to jobs, and when I talked to Judge Veta over the last year, he said, Beto, if there's one thing that I want you to do for me when you're governor, it's to make sure that we have better jobs in this community. Jobs that pay a living wage, jobs where people don't need public assistance, jobs where you don't have to work a second or third shift just to make ends meet. And knowing the judge, he didn't just make a request, he came with solutions. He said, how do we work with the folks in Cameron County and SpaceX to bring more of these high wage, high skill, high technology engineering jobs to this community? He said, I've got the talent here. I've got the people who will work their tails off. We just need the opportunity placed in front of them. How do we make sure that for those of you who want to be nurses or enter into the medical profession as doctors or psychiatrists or psychologists, we remove cost as an object and clear the path in terms of student loan debt if, in exchange, you agree that you're going to serve your neighbors and fellow residents right here in Starr County. We used to have a program like that in Texas. Let's bring it back. Let's get more doctors here and more high-paying jobs. Y por el último, those educators I keep talking about, we're losing them right now by the thousands. I don't have to tell you that because I see all the heads nodding, but my 5th grader that I keep talking about, Henry, so his completion ceremony was this week. It was Thursday, or last week, Thursday in El Paso. And I was sitting next to another proud parent whose child was in another 5th grade classroom. And I said, you know, I don't know about your kid, but Henry has had 5 substitute teachers this year. He has yet to have a permanent classroom teacher. And this is the last day of school. And it's too bad, and God love the substitute teachers. They're doing their best. But a permanent classroom teacher would have allowed Henry and his classmates to make a better connection and to have some consistency and some sustainability in that leadership in the classroom. And this other parent turned to me and she said, it's the same thing in my kid's classroom. It is all over the state of Texas. You've got a governor who's literally pushing people out of the profession right now, whether it is CRT or turning in the parents of transgender kids or paying you $7,500 less than the average nationally, or for our retired teachers, not having a cost of living adjustment since the year 2004. New teachers see that and they say, hey, I'm not going to risk going into a profession where this state is not going to take care of me after I've given the best years of my life. You know, what if we paid those teachers what they are really worth? What if we treated them as the professionals that they really are? So much that we could be doing. And again, those who want to enter the profession and the kind of jobs that we want to create here in Starr County, what if not only they paid better, but we remove student loan debt out of the way so that no one has an obstacle in their path in order to serve this community and to deliver for those kids? That's the Texas that I want to live in. As I listen to your neighbors across the other 253 counties, Deacon Salinas, who reminded us how many there are in this state, that's what they want too. And I'm talking Republicans, Democrats, independents, big city folks, rural towns. Those are the things that bring us together. And as the doctor said earlier, there are going to be some things that we disagree on, even among Democrats. That's okay. We'll hear each other out. We'll find consensus in common ground. But where we already have agreement on great public schools, the kind of jobs we want to work, the ability to see a doctor, let us move forward. That's what this election is about. Last thing, and then I'm going to turn the microphone over to you. In fact, I'm going to turn it over to Chairman Hinojosa, and then I'm going to turn it over to you. But last thing, if this vision of this state appeals to you, this is the kind of Texas that you want to live in. One where we're defined not by our fears and our hatreds, but by our hopes and our ambitions. Then I want you to be part of this campaign. And we're going to be looking for people who will host canvasses or block walks, which is just a way of saying opportunities for people to go talk to their neighbors about this election, to invite them to vote, to gain a commitment from them, and to ensure that we have the votes that we need here in Starr County to ensure that we win statewide. So at the very end of this meeting, I'll be asking who would like to host a canvas, help us to reach your neighbors and friends. Be thinking about that. Be thinking about what you're willing to do to achieve the Texas that you want to live in going forward, and we'll sign you up at the end of the meeting. With that, I'm going to turn this over to our chairman, Gilberto Hinojosa, who is not just the chairman of the state of Texas Democratic Party, but he's obviously also from this region, has served in a position of public trust as a county judge, is widely admired across the state, and I'm so grateful that he's here. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn this microphone over.
Thank you, Congressman. And thank you so much for being here today. And let's not forget that before Beto O'Rourke undertook this effort to try to change Texas in a way that needs to be changed. He was a United States Congressman for a number of years in El Paso, and he did great work in that job. A week ago, tomorrow, I believe, we lost 19 children who were precious to their families, to every single person in that community, and to all of us. And there's nothing that we can do to bring them back. There's a lot of people who are suffering today to the hurt of losing them, not just their families, but all of us. There's probably not a single person in this room that didn't cry after hearing what happened to these children. And I think that what we're asking you, Congressman, is that let's not allow their tragic deaths to go in vain, in vain. Let us, from now until the first day of school, make sure that we remind this governor of ours and the members of the legislature that have the ability to make a change, that we need to ensure that our children who arrive to school in August of this year feel safe, feel the comfort of what a classroom should provide them with. That we remind these people who have the ability to make the change that it is not just their obligation as public servants to implement all the necessary things that need to be implemented to provide a safe and educational environment for our children. But they do it because it's the right thing, it's the Christian thing, it's the moral thing to do for our community. And we are depending upon you to continue in your effort, not just to get elected governor of this great state, because we know that when you do, it'll be a dramatic change for all of us in this state, but also that you place this issue continuously in the forefront in the debate and the discussion of what happens in the state from now until that day when those children have to walk into that classroom, so that they can have the comfort to believe that this is going to be a place where I can learn safely without the fear that someone will come in here and cause a horror and a tragedy that is just unimaginable to any one of us, that it could happen to any one of our children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren. So we want to thank you for coming here today to continue this discussion. It's not really a campaign trip, it's really an opportunity for the congressman to hear you as parents, as members of this community, of people who love this country and this community, of people who carry guns and have family members who carry guns and use them to go hunting and protect their families as well, that there are ways to ensure to protect our community every single day, particularly our children. So we're glad that you came to listen to our community. These are fine people. I have a lot of ties to Starr County, having worked with the commissioners here for many years, the county judge, and several members of the school districts in Roma and the city and so forth. And I know this community real well. I've known Jessica for many years. These folks really, really care about our community, but they care very much about who their next governor is going to be. So thank you for being here so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very, very grateful to you. Thank you for being here. We now want to turn the microphone over to you. And as I said at the outset, I came to listen. I came to learn, as the chairman just said. I want to know what is on your mind and how we can work together to improve Texas. That is really all that matters at the end of the day. And when we do the work to win this election, and when we win this, and when we're sworn in 2023, I want to be able to hit the ground running for Starr County. So being here today ensures that I know what is most important to you. That sets our agenda and our priorities. Cynthia Cano, who's over here at the right side of the room, she's got a microphone. If you raise your hand, she'll bring it to you. She also has some Clorox wipes, and she's wiping that microphone down after everyone uses it, just out of an abundance of caution. So in case you're concerned about using a microphone someone else just used, just know that she's wiping it down and keeping us all safe and protected.
Okay, raise your hand. That's right. Raise your hand. I will come to you. I see also a couple rows of students back here, and I'm hoping that one of you raise your hand. I would love, and I'm sure all of us would love to hear from you. So please raise your hand. I will come to you. I see you right there. I'm going to start here, and then I'll make my way right up there.
Great.
Hello, nice to meet you, Beto. So I have a prepared question. You said to Governor Abbott recently, the time to stop the next shooting is now. You said that a few days ago. If elected, how do you propose to combat the social and political opposition to gun control in Texas effectively enough to pass legislation that could stop it now?
Thanks for asking the question. And when we talk about now, I think we have to, as the chairman just said, not just be thinking about what the next administration will be doing, but what we can do between now and when school starts again in August. In the El Paso Independent School District, where my kids are, they just turned to year-round education. So our first day of school is August 1st, which is just nuts to me. But that means August 1st, they'll be back in a classroom. And our current governor, who uniquely has the power to call a special session, where he could literally ask Democrats and Republicans, listen, you saw what just happened in Uvalde. We know what happened in Santa Fe High School, Sutherland Springs, Midland, Odessa, and El Paso. What happened in Buffalo, what's going on around the country. We have a chance to do something. Here's 45 days, get after it, and let's get it done before these kids return to the classroom. Instead, he's called for a committee. And now you can call for a committee. I can call for a committee. We can sit around the table, talk about good ideas. That committee is absolutely powerless, whether you call it, the governor calls it, or anyone else. So what I would do if I were governor right now, what he should be doing is calling for that special session. And just so you know, he's called for special sessions on critical race theory. He's called for special sessions to change our election laws to make it harder to vote. He's called special sessions to determine which kids can play which athletics in which schools. Certainly this one rises to a level of urgency far beyond anything else that he's called a special session for. But if we assume your question is correct, that he won't do this, and we have to wait till this next election, which we should not have to, here's what we can do. I mentioned earlier those three first ideas on guns, where we protect the Second Amendment, because we have this proud, long tradition in Texas of gun ownership. I'm part of it, fourth generation, grew up with guns in the household, grew up with the responsibility and understanding the accountability of owning that firearm, of making sure that I protect myself, my family members, anybody else who is around us. That is most of us who grew up with guns. So when I say that universal background checks could save lives, it will, but it's also something that gun owners, non-gun owners, Republicans and Democrats can actually agree on. All that has been missing literally is the leadership, the person at the top in the highest position of public trust saying, this will be on the agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, get after it, let's work on it. And it may necessarily, and almost certainly will, involve some level of consensus or compromise. I may have my perfect idea of how universal background checks work, but we live in a democracy, and I've got to listen to people who don't always agree with me on that, and we've got to find out where we can find some level of agreement. Same holds true for safe storage laws and these red flag laws that I was talking about earlier. The other thing is actually you and your fellow Texans. Abraham Lincoln had this saying, public sentiment is everything. In other words, those people in elected office, they fear more than they fear anything else, losing their re-election. If they hear from you that this is a priority in your community, for your family, for your kids, for those educators in those classrooms, they're going to listen up. And if they have a governor who's already laid the table for them, said this is the agenda, you will be working on this, I want to work with you, we'll come up with a consensus, compromise solution ultimately at the end of the day, but we're going to get something done. We are going to make progress. And last thing I'll tell you, the chairman mentioned I was in Congress for 6 years. Every single day of my service, I was in the minority. Republicans were in the majority. Only way I could get anything passed, and I got a few important things passed, was by working with people who didn't see eye to eye with me on every issue and finding where we could get to that common ground and get something passed. And that included with Donald J. Trump, the guy I agree with on almost nothing. I got him to sign some of our legislation because we could even find common ground with him. You know, Deacon Salinas said in this very polarized, very divided moment that we're in this country, that's true for our state as well. We cannot just preach to and work with Democrats. We've got to listen to and bring in Republicans and independents as well. That's how we're going to get it done. Thanks for asking the question. Appreciate it.
My name is Jesus Ramirez. I'm originally UTRGV student, and my question to you was that I live in a community in which year after year we celebrate by shooting, and I hear shootings all over my house, and we have to hit the ground because we don't know if a bullet is coming through the roof. And so we have to worry about that. And this is year after year, and I guarantee you that in July the 4th, that's going to happen because we don't have the necessary gun laws in the state of Texas that we need to have. And so I want to ask, what are you going to do? Because my worry is that I'm gonna have to hit the ground again.
This is what your question reminds me of, and should remind all of us of. You know, I keep mentioning these massacres that have taken place. You know, Paso, Midland, Odessa, what just happened in Uvalde. And it's important because it terrorizes those communities, and it terrifies us about our kids and what might happen. But to your point, every single day in this state, someone loses their life. Some people lose their lives to gun violence. Last year, more than 4,000 of our fellow Texans were killed by guns. We will not know or ever remember most of their names. It is so common, it kind of numbs us to the shock of somebody dying in this way. The way it would shock somebody in almost any other part of the world, because this doesn't happen anywhere else on the planet today. So it's individual acts of gun violence or accidental gun discharges, or even, as you said, folks who are used to celebrating with guns. And it might have been one thing if you did that out on the ranch, although it's probably not good to do that there either. It's quite another thing when you do it in an area where you have neighbors and other people who may just innocently be affected, harmed, or even killed by this. And to your point, there are people who are killed all the time through this kind of celebratory gunfire. Remember that happened to somebody in El Paso on a New Year's Eve when I was a kid. So getting back to what I think is the real tradition of Texas. The real tradition of Texas is not the NRA. The real tradition of Texas is not permitless carry. This is the deal Abbott signed where he had allowed anybody with a gun to carry it in public without any kind of background check or any vetting or any training whatsoever. And he did it in a state where more cops have been gunned down than in any other state. He did it in a state that's seeing a spike in violence and gun violence in particular. And he did it despite what police officers and sheriff's deputies asked him not to do. They said, Mr. Governor, this is going to make our job harder. This is going to put more officers' lives on the line. It's going to make it tougher to protect those that we serve in our communities. He turned his back on them and did it nonetheless. So to your question, let's get back to the responsible tradition that at least I grew up with in El Paso, Texas. You might have grown up with when you were younger. And yes, some of that is legislated. Some of that is led by the governor. But some of it is just what you did right now in front of 100 of your neighbors. You said, hey, this is going on in my community. It needs to stop. Let's be responsible, look out for, and be good to and by for one another. So one way or another, I'm on your side to get this done. And we'll do that as a candidate now. We'll certainly do that as governor. But even having a forum like this one where you can raise the issue, I hope improves gun safety in this community and gets us back to that tradition that we need to return to. Thanks for asking the question. Appreciate it.
Okay, I have my next question over here. I'm still looking for a student. I know one of you's going to raise your hand.
Good morning, Beto. My name is Ricky Perez, and I serve as the board president for our neighboring school district. I know that both of our school districts here in Rio Grande and Gruya and in Roma has just, we've just gone through commencement exercises this past week. And probably the security that we employed to make sure that all our participants were safe was probably the highest measures that we have used ever in light of what has happened. We're in the process of considering redesigning the entrances to all our 9 campuses, as I'm sure our neighboring districts are looking at other measures to secure their district as well. And all of this is going to be a costly measure. Nevertheless, we will not be afraid to take on whatever cost is necessary to make sure that our community, our parents, rest assured that they know that our district is doing what they can to be able to ensure that their children are safe at school. If elected, we would be looking for the leadership from our next governor to be able to help out our school districts across the state of Texas. We are concerned with our county and our local school districts here. But sir, what ideas or what can you tell us today to assure us that your administration will be able to support our local school districts as much as you can to be able to help us with these security measures?
Thank you for being here. And also thank you for what you do. I mentioned all those who are serving in positions of public trust. Probably one of the least glamorous jobs is working within our schools. Trustees don't get paid. They get the calls from the parents who are angry about a given thing or other. They have massive budgets they have to oversee, and very often they're the largest taxing entity in a given county. So in many ways, it's a thankless job. So let me first of all thank you for doing it, and to tell you, as we drove in from Laredo earlier today, we passed your campus, which seemed to have actually really good security in terms of the perimeter fencing. We saw the sign for the world-class mariachi group that Roma is in part famous for, that I remember watching during the beginning of the pandemic over Zoom calls. And the fact that you're here and holding me accountable for what I can do to partner with you says everything about your leadership, and I'm grateful for that. But I want to remind everybody that this should be a very low bar for a governor to pass, to work with the local community. Part of the reason that I got to know Judge Veta so well is because the county judges along the border had to fight Greg Abbott when they were trying to save the lives of people who are dying of COVID in our communities. My home county of El Paso, our county judge, Ricardo Samaniego, we had the deadliest county in America for COVID deaths. And yet our county judge was fighting our governor, who would not allow him to implement public health orders that would have saved more lives. School districts across the state of Texas had to take the governor to court to be able to protect children in the classrooms from a pandemic before we had a vaccine. I talked about educators, including trustees and administrators, literally keeping kids alive. There's nothing more true that I could say about what you all did during the middle of the pandemic, and very telling that you had to fight the governor of the state of Texas to be able to do that. Let me tell you how I am going to partner with you. Right now, in your community, your local property taxpayers foot about 60% of the bill for anything you want to do. If you want to harden that school, limit the entrances, the exits, have more resource officers on your campus, pay your teachers a little bit more, that's coming out of the pockets of your local homeowners. And as our appraisals continue to climb, as our tax bills go up, it is pricing some people literally out of their homes. Ironically, many of those retired teachers who have not seen a cost of living adjustment since 2004. How do we change that? We up the state's share of spending to at least 50%. Right now, it is at 40%. Get it up to 50%. Reduce the burden on you, the trustees in your community, and then partner with you. Cynthia, you're losing all your students and the questions they were going to ask.
No question.
Yeah, we'll get you all next time. We will come back. Thank you for coming out. And so ensuring that you have more resources from the state of Texas to spend on whatever you think is most important, that also should not be dictated from the governor or from the legislature. You will know better than anyone else what students within your independent school district need, what your educators need. Let's just make sure that you have the state resources to get that done. And then in addition, y además, there are things that really are the state's responsibility that I don't know should be coming out of your general fund, like the security and safety of your community and your campus. I want you to direct your dollars into quality of education and the social emotional learning and everything else that's involved in providing a world-class education. But last and most important point, to come back to the beginning, I want to be your partner. And that means meeting you at the table, hearing your best ideas, and finding out how we're going to help you to get those done. As governor, I promise you we will do that. Thank you for asking the question. Appreciate it.
Hello, Beto. Hello, everyone. This is Brenda Lee Salinas. I'm the La Jolla AFT president. And the question that I want to pose to you, Beto, is when 66% of Texas A&T members surveyed that they are considered living education. We know that it's very clear there's a crisis. You talked about it, the pandemic, right? So we need to go ahead and keep our students safe, just as well as our teachers. So now this situation that happened in Uvalde and so many other places, that needs to stop. And you have made very good points as far as that if you are elected governor, that you're gonna go ahead and take action. And it's just not talking, but you're gonna take action, and that we believe in you. Because we need change. We want change. So we hope, that if you are elected, that you will fight for our educators, for public education, for our students, for our teachers, for our community, because that's what we need. And as far as the inflation, the cost of living, look at all these teachers. Gasoline, yes, everything. Yeah, it is very, very difficult. So we also need to consider as far as making sure that every teacher, every educator in the state of Texas, start with $60,000 beginning pay. And for every hourly employee, we should have $15. Yeah, 15, that's what we need.
Thank you for being here. And just quickly to add to a few things that you said, you mentioned inflation. And we were all feeling that. We feel it when we go to the grocery store. We feel it when we fill up the tank in our van that we're driving across the state of Texas in. And the numbers still shock me when I see the total at the end of this, after I finish filling up. We see it in our property taxes. I just mentioned that earlier as it relates to school. But since Abbott's been governor, property taxes have gone up $20 billion in the state of Texas. That's an increase of 40%. You see it in your utility bills. Remember when he couldn't keep the lights on or the power going when the temperature dropped last year? He passed the cost of that not onto the people who caused the problem in the first place, but shifted it to you. And on average, your utility bills have gone up $50 a month, more than they were prior to the power grid failure. And they will stay up $50 a month for the next 20 years. When he shut down our international bridges at Far Reynosa, at Laredo, in El Paso, Texas, it hit our economy to the tune of $4.2 billion and sent the price of groceries through the roof. $5 avocados in our grocery stores, thanks to Greg Abbott. He's the single greatest driver of inflation in the state of Texas. In addition to making sure that the state pays its fair share of educational funding in our local communities, at least getting up to 50%. In addition to raising the cost of living adjustment for retired teachers and paying teachers and other educators a living wage in their schools, as you just suggested that we do. We also have to bring down the cost of living in Texas and reduce inflation by making sure that we have fairness in our property taxes. That means the big wigs and the corporations and the billionaires pay their fair share just like all of us do. We're going to be able to lessen the burden on each one of us. I'll tell you one story that I think you'll be interested in because it involves public ed. I was at a meeting just like this in Port Arthur, and the school board president for the Port Arthur Independent School District said, Beto, we just cut a $30 million check to Motiva. They're a refiner. It's the largest refinery in North America. They're in Port Arthur. Motiva hired the lawyers. They hired the lobbyists. They were able to contest their property tax appraisal and bring it down so much that the school district had to write them a check for $30 million. Now, they still needed the $30 million to provide the education of their kids. They now just had to tax all the property owners in private residential properties through the roof, literally, in order to get those resources in. Walmart in Tarrant County, their valuations dropped 6%. Every homeowner's went up over 50%. In other words, this is an unfair playing field. And all of us who are homeowners or renters are eating the costs that others are not paying. If we had fairness in property taxes, we could reduce your property taxes. We could reduce inflation. We could increase the amount of money coming into our schools and our local government. So there is a lot that we're going to be able to do together. So grateful that you're here, that you're standing up literally to fight for other educators and to make sure that we do the right thing while we still can. Thank you for being here. We'll take a couple more questions and then we'll stick around for a little while for anybody who wants to say
I
hello.
don't think I need a microphone.
You sure don't.
I'm not a statistician, I'm not an economist, but there is a concern about how are we gonna pay for additional safety in our, in our schools. That's correct. I've got a suggestion.
Please.
And I think it would also help with people that don't want to spend money frivolously. What will you do about cutting out the money that the state is spending on a wall that does not work? And if the wall was working, why would you have over 200,000 people cross every month? I mean, come on.
That's right.
You know, that's wrong. Eliminate that money. Eliminate the money that is being used for the Texas Reserve. Put it into our schools. That's where we need it. Right. Yeah.
Thank you for being here. This governor has moved $5 billion of your money. Didn't fall out of the sky, did not grow on trees, was not given to us by somebody else. This came from you. And he put it towards the border, and we all agree that we want the border to be better. In fact, I think the border is pretty great right now. I'd love to see investments in our communities, protecting our natural heritage, improving the ability to help those who are seeking asylum and trying to do it lawfully and in an orderly fashion because they literally cannot return to their home countries for fear of being killed or their children being kidnapped. I want to see us do a better job. But involuntarily activating 10,000 of our fellow Texans with a week's notice, they were taken from their families, their kids, their jobs, their careers, and sent to the border for a 1-year deployment. And these Guard members have no constitutional authority to arrest or detain. They can only spot and radio in to CBP or to local law enforcement. And there is some value in that. I think a voluntary activation at some small number might make sense. We've been doing that in Texas for years. But 10,000 members, a wall that is more of a public art installation than it is anything else, because as you said, it's done nothing to stop anybody. But it really speaks to the larger problem that we have in this state and in this country is we're excited, present company excluded, for bumper sticker solutions like build that wall or deport them all or be incredibly cruel or do whatever it takes. We just don't want to have to deal with this problem instead of addressing the underlying issues. Like the fact that the last major rewrite of our immigration laws was when Ronald Reagan was still the president of the United States. If there's any state that could lead the way in rewriting our laws, it is this state right here. In a community, it is Rio Grande City. Tell me people who understand the dynamics of immigration better than those who live right here in this community. And I'm not talking Democrats again. I'm talking Democrats, Republicans, Independents, no me importa. As long as they live here on the border, they understand it and can help to lead the country. And when we do that, we're going to find a lawful, orderly way for people who want to come here and work. When we were in Brownsville during the winter freeze and the power failure, and we were traveling the state trying to help people, I remember meeting migrant laborers who were picking onions, and I was asking them, what's it going to be like when you go back to your home? And they said, I don't know. We hang out outside our home because we build a fire out there to keep warm because we have no heat in it. They still did not miss a day of work, providing the food that I frankly take for granted every single day. These people are literally willing to die, and many do, to come here and do work that no one else will be able to do. Why can we not find a lawful way for them to be able to do it? Those asylum seekers that I talked about, people who've been separated from their families and need to be unified, these are Texas values. We all want to do the right thing. And can we also acknowledge that there are some who want to bring illegal drugs into this country or who are trafficking in human beings? Absolutely. When we rewrite our laws and do the right things, and we can focus on those who want to harm us and stop them before they do. But what we're doing right now is not only incredibly expensive, to the gentleman's point, money that could be put in to our public schools or into reducing our property taxes or into doing both, but it doesn't solve the problem. And at the very beginning of this meeting, I mentioned the mass shooting in El Paso. And I just want to repeat this because it bears repeating. Those 23 people were killed because the president at the time and the governor that we have right now kept warning of an invasion and of a replacement and of a political takeover by those who do not look like the majority in this country right now. There are people who are listening to that kind of rhetoric, and they are acting on it right now. And so not only is it the money that we're spending and the problems that we are not solving, it is literally the lives that we are losing in our communities. So there is so much more that we could be doing. And imagine a Texas that's actually leading on this in a way that we could all be proud of. So thank you for asking this question. Really important.
This is our last question.
Okay. La última. No pressure.
None at all. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
I'm not from Rio Grande and I'm not from Roma. I'm actually from Zapata County. And so I'm so excited to be here. Even though we were a pink state this past election, which I am not proud of, and that's why I'm here, because we are going to turn it back blue.
All right.
For sure. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it, and I'm so proud to be here today. This is my mom and my aunt, one of my good friends from San Ignacio, Texas. So if you all know Zapata County, you all know San Ignacio, Texas, and that's where we're from.
The church there.
Yes, sir. And we have our bird sanctuary. It's an amazing little town. I have a couple of questions from our county commissioners because they weren't able to attend. It's asking, what resources can be brought to Zapata County to help with local economic development, to help attract more businesses or industries to rural areas like our county? And also, just, FYI, I am a parent of a 10-year firefighter, EMT. I'm so proud of that, and of course, I'm a proud mom. But I see that my son's having to work 2 jobs to make ends meet. Has 2 children, and he works at Zapata County Fire and Webb County Fire, making minimum $11 an hour. How can you, as our next governor, because you will be our next governor, how can you help small communities such as ours that is being bombarded by national armory there, and we only have very negative things that are told about in our nation, whether because we turned red or because of situations that have occurred in Zapata County. We're a caring community. We love our people, and we just want to be able to have the resources to take care of our own, including teachers, first responders, law enforcement, without having to be to see all that negativity in our county.
Thank you so much for being here. And as you were beginning your question, I asked Cynthia to make sure that we stay in touch with you, because we were just in Zapata maybe 3 months ago, and we actually went down to meet with members of the Guard, just to meet with them in person. We'd read things, we'd heard things. We wanted to meet with them and hear what they were experiencing. And it's really troubling what we as a state have asked them to do and what it means to them and the toll it's taken. As you know, we've lost 7 of them so far. 4 of them have taken their lives. 3 others we have lost as well. And we wanted to be there, but we also ended up knocking on doors because we didn't know you and didn't have your phone number yet. So we just were randomly knocking on doors in Zapata just to meet people and find out what was on their mind. And that first issue you brought up from the commissioners about jobs came up a lot. And then you mentioned your son making $11 an hour, being a first responder. We asked him to go into harm's way. We literally, I guess implicit in the contract is he may lose his life trying to save other people's lives. And $11 an hour? I mean, that is in no way reflective of the pride that you and I feel in the work that he's doing and the value that he's providing. So again, to the question asked by the trustee from Roma, the state's got to pay its fair share. And there's no role more important for government in our lives than protecting our lives and keeping us safe. And that includes those like your son or the officers who are here right now, who are the first to respond and to intervene and literally make a life or death difference for us. So I'm going to make sure that we follow up, and Cynthia, I know you're making notes, that we follow up with the commissioners in Zapata to find out how the state can better partner with first responders to make sure that resources are there and not an object to keeping people on and recruiting more of them there. On this issue of jobs, again, you and the community are going to know better than anybody else what that economic development plan is. And what you want from me, I think, is a partner who's going to help you execute it, make sure that it is funded. But I will say in my conversation with the county judge here in Starr, talking about building on other exciting developments like SpaceX and what's going on in Cameron County and those high skill, high value, high pay engineering jobs that are associated with it. We're producing engineers in this community, and I don't need to tell you, we're very often exporting engineers from this community who go work in Dallas or San Antonio or New York or Tokyo. We want them back here in Rio Grande City, but we need the jobs here and in Zapata as well. And the other thing that I'll say is, listen, I love when we see good news that a company is moving to Texas or they're expanding their facilities in Texas. And very often we're using Texas resources to make that happen. And I think there's probably a time and place for that. But as governor, I'm gonna make sure that when we use your tax dollars, our state resources to attract or expand an employer, we're gonna prioritize communities that are underserved, where we're losing our young people right now. So that describes this community, that describes Zapata, that describes El Paso. Beyond this issue of gun violence in our schools and public safety, the fear that Amy and I have for our kids is that we're going to, as a community, invest in their public education, in the great parks and museums and quality of life that we have in El Paso. And then when they're old enough to, they're gonna go to some other community and never come back here. And we will have spent our entire lives giving them the chance to do something great, and they'll go give that greatness to somebody else. We want them to do that in El Paso, just like parents here want them to do it in Rio Grande City, just like you want your son to stay in Zapata. To your point, and to the commissioner's point, we need the jobs that will keep them there. I will be a partner to make sure that that's a priority. So thank you for coming out here. Yeah, she said she's gonna hold me to that. I love that. Thank you for coming out. So grateful to you and Dr. Valeria Rios. Thank you for organizing this, bringing everyone together. You said you did this on short notice, and literally we just had like a couple of days to bring everybody together, and it's really impressive, midday on a Monday, that everyone is here. To Deacon Salinas, thank you for the invocation at the very beginning. South Texas College and our entire team. We're gonna hang out for a little while right here, Cynthia. We're gonna hang out for a little while. Anybody who wants to say hello or grab a picture, we would love to see you. And then I'm gonna ask, I've got Chrissy back here, Amanda, if you are willing to host a canvas to go knock on doors, who are we going to? Chrissy? Chrissy's got a clipboard, she's at the very back. If you'll see Chrissy, she's also not shy, and she's gonna come up and ask you if you'll host a canvas if she does not get, how many we're trying to get today? 5, 10? We're trying to get at least 5 hosts. If she doesn't get a host, she's gonna block the exit. And no, she won't block the exit, but she will ask you as you leave if you're willing to host. So we'll just hang out here. Thank you all for coming out. Very grateful to you. Adios.